Welcome to A Champion's Journey. I'm Matt Davidson. From an early age, I've had the privilege of learning from world champions and world-class performers, and I've always been fascinated by what drives them to the pinnacle of achievement. In this podcast, I'll interview high performers to learn more about the habits and rituals which have helped them on the road to championship victory. The air is filled with excitement here at Skydive Arizona. The drop zone is buzzing with activity as teams from all across the globe finish up last-minute preparations for the upcoming World Cup of Formation Skydiving and Artistic Events. During a break in training with Arizona Airspeed, I was able to sit down and have a conversation with legendary freefall photographer and videographer Mike Mcgowan. Mike has been deeply involved in the sport of skydiving since he first stepped out of an airplane 55 years ago. He's made so many meaningful contributions to the sport that it's hard to keep track. He helped revolutionize how skydiving competitions are judged by being the first videographer to film a team from the air, an element which is a necessary and inseparable part of our sport today. In this episode, we discuss many topics, including Mike's service in the U.S. Navy as a parachute rigger and rescue swimmer during Vietnam, his first freefall photography jumps with a handheld camera, detailed descriptions of the first camera helmets and the challenges Mike had to overcome with that gear, how he better prepared himself to withstand the rigors of early freefall parachuting through his dedication to physical training, and how that training helped save his life after a near brush with death. We also discuss emergency procedures training, Mike's involvement in the evolution of research and development, his most memorable R&D experiences, Mike's advice for aspiring freefall photographers, his involvement in world record freefall formations, the recent release of his book titled Selections, and much more. Mike has a uniquely beautiful perspective of our beloved sport. Shining through in every photo he takes is a genuine love for skydiving, and, to an even greater degree, for his subjects of focus, the people of our sport. For over half a century, he's captured thousands of magical moments on film, and for Mike, it really is all about living in the moment. He fondly refers to freefall as high-speed meditation. He's endeared himself to hundreds, if not thousands, of other skydivers by capturing their special moments of high-speed meditation for all to see. Welcome to Champion's Journey podcast. I'm back at sunny Skydive Arizona, gearing up for the 2019 World Cup of Formation Skydiving and Artistic Events, and the drop zone is buzzing with activity as teams from all across the globe prepare to start competing on October 8th. Adding to my excitement is the fact that I'm sitting here with the legendary pioneer of freefall photography and videography, Mike Mcgowan. Mike, how are you, buddy?
I'm doing great. Thanks for asking, and thank you for those very kind words.
Yeah, no worries. Thanks for coming on the podcast. This is an honor for me to be able to sit down with you. It's really cool.
It's my pleasure.
I'd like to get started. A lot has been talked about as far as your accomplishments in skydiving, and we'll definitely get to that. But I'd like to ask you what your childhood was like, where you grew up, and what was your first memory of knowing that you wanted to jump out of an airplane?
Well, I grew up on a farm, and right across one of our fields, one of the farmers had an airport. And back in the early 50s, when I was maybe 10, 11 years old, I was walking in the field, and I heard this airplane climbing, and I looked up, and sure enough, a little dot appeared, and then all of a sudden there was a parachute. And this was back in the round days. I don't even know if it was modified back then. And I knew that moment, and it's never changed, that I wanted to jump out of an airplane. That's really what I wanted to do.
Nice. And what were some of your early memories growing up as a kid before that? What kind of activities were you into? Were you into sports?
Mischief.
Mischief?
Yeah, mostly mischief. So much so that I went into the Navy when I was 17.
Oh, wow. So was that the age at the time, or did you, lie about your age to try to get into the Navy a little early?
No, that was the age at the time. I had to get my dad to sign for it and to let me get in. But he was glad to have me go, I think.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah.
What kind of mischief were you causing at those times?
I like to get in scuffles with people. I was just kind of an ornery kid. And I think it was just because maybe I had kind of a weird upbringing. My parents both drank a lot, so I don't even know if I'm supposed to talk about this here, but they drank a lot, and I had kind of a weird upbringing. So I was always full of mischief and always getting into scuffles. Nothing serious.
So when you joined the Navy, what occupational specialty did you go into?
First thing I did was I became a parachute rigger because I read in the format to be a parachute rigger, you had to jump out of an airplane with a parachute you packed. And I quit reading the format as soon as I saw that because I knew that's what I wanted to do. So I became a parachute rigger, made my first jump at Lakehurst, New Jersey in 1964. And then I got stationed at NAAS Ream Field in California, and I became a rescue air crewman, which they call swimmers now.
Oh, wow, cool. So were you qualified as a scuba diver?
No, just a swimmer.
Okay. And did you have any real-world operations that you got into with that?
I flew air rescue in Vietnam.
Oh, wow. Well, thanks for your service. Really appreciate it. I didn't know that. That's
well,
awesome.
Thanks for yours, too.
Thanks. What were some of the, or how long did you spend in the Navy, and what were some of your best memories of that experience?
Well, I spent 4 years in the Navy, and then some of my best memories is when I got stationed in California, and I found a drop zone, and then I was 18, and you were supposed to be 21 to make a jump back then in California, but the guy, Jim McDonald, who ran the drop zone, says, well, if you're in the military and you can fight for your country, you can make a parachute jump too. So I started jumping at Lakeside, California, and I started skydiving there. And I continued to skydive there except when I went off on deployment for Vietnam. And those were, of course, great memories. You know, your first jumps, there's all the excitement of making your first jump, and it was really, really exciting back then because we didn't have the equipment and the technology that we have today. And so when you jumped, you really figured you were risking your life. And to jump and then go ahead and do things in spite of risking your life, like relative work, was a great challenge, but it was just an incredible amount of fun, too.
What was the equipment like for your first jump?
Awful. It was really heavy, and we had a chest-mounted reserve. In Cape Wells, no such thing as a three-ring back then. And it had what they call a double L cut in it. In other words, it had two panels cut out and then a small portion of either side of that panel, which looked like a double L. And that's what they cut into it so you'd have steerability. And I think you had a whole 4 or 5 miles an hour forward speed with that. It was a real rocket ship.
Oh, wow. What were the landings like under that?
Well, they were hard. Luckily, back then, I only weighed about 140 or 150 pounds, so the landings weren't gruesome, but they were hard. You know, I like to say each landing was a controlled crash.
Yeah, that sounds like a good metaphor for that. The equipment's definitely come a long way, and since then, what got you into wanting to do videography and photography in free fall?
Well, I've always been interested in photography. It's always seemed like magic to me. You know, you point this instrument at somebody and you push a button and you capture that second, that instant, that person, that thing, that place. And so I always wanted to mix it with skydiving, but I was so busy jumping, I had 1,000 jumps before I decided to put a camera on my helmet. And then once I put a camera on my helmet, my die was cast. I mean, there was no getting around it. I didn't want to do anything else. I quit AFF. I quit everything else. All I wanted to do was do camera work.
So you were doing AFF instruction before you started doing camera work?
Yeah.
Okay. I think I read somewhere that one of your first cameras was a handheld?
P3 7S. I bought it in Vietnam when I was over there, and it was a handheld, and I'd fly up to the people or person that I was filming. I'd put the camera to my eye, look through the viewfinder, push the button, and then I'd cock it, and then fly back into position, and cock it, and take the picture, and keep doing it that way.
Wow. Did you have any kind of sight set up, or was it just the whatever sight was on that particular camera?
I looked through the viewfinder of the camera.
Oh, wow. That's really cool. Did you have any kind of strap that kept it around your wrist or anything to keep it from?
Yeah, I had a piece of 550 cord tied from the camera to my wrist, so if I lost it on an opening shock, I wouldn't lose the camera.
Okay. Yeah, it makes sense. What were some of the challenges with that early skydiving equipment, and can you describe what your early helmet was like and what kind of camera was on that, the challenges that you had, and what kind of solutions did you come up to creatively deal with those issues that arose from that early equipment?
Well, one of the challenges, of course, was there was very few people that was in front of me doing it. So there was nobody to ask, or there was no book to look and see what to do. So I mounted the camera on my helmet just guessing, and I used a coat hanger and put it in front of my eye, hooked to the helmet. And I had somebody point my helmet, so I could sight it. They'd point it at a certain object, and then I would bend the coat hanger until it coincided with what the guy was seeing. And that's how I filmed. And I missed a lot of stuff being in frame because that was really crude and hard to do. But I got some good pictures, too, enough to keep me enthused anyhow. And then Joe Smith, some of the old-timers will remember his name. He was had a parachute sales and service and a real famous parachute rigger. Him and Dave DeWolf were great friends. He saw me at the Nationals in Mcgowan and says, "You can't be jumping like that." And when we got back, he sent me a ring sight. And that opened up a whole new world for me.
Oh, wow.
Yeah.
What year was that?
Probably 1980, maybe, somewhere in that area. You're taxing my feeble old mind here.
Sorry about that. Yeah, it's just interesting on a timeline to see when some of that equipment was developed.
Sure.
Yeah. And what others were there? Can you describe the kind of helmet that like your first camera helmet, for example?
Sure, it was an old hockey helmet that
wow.
I got, and I modified it with the chin cup, and then mounted the camera on there. And some of the problems were the cameras back then were shooting, of course, in film, and there wasn't the metering systems that there is now, so we had to guess our exposures, And it wasn't like today you could get down and take a look at your pictures and see what you did right or wrong and then correct it. You had to wait till you got the film back from the processor to even see what you got, So the camera equipment itself was challenging. You literally became a photographer. You didn't get a picture because you had to learn about f-stops and shutter speeds and composition and things like that. You were forced into it.
Wow. So after the hockey helmet, how did it progress from there?
Well, I went from there to an old motorcycle helmet that had a full face, and I cut it and put a hinge on the front of the full face so it would swing open, and then I close it with what they call Zeus fasteners. It's the same fasteners they used to use on closing aircraft shells and stuff like that. And there was no getting out of it. If you caught a line or something like that, you were just so long. But thank goodness that never happened. And the parachute equipment was a challenge too because squares were just starting out, and they just had to open fast, and so we always had hard openings, fast opening canopies, and the cameras themselves were very heavy back then, and I ended up wanting 3 cameras instead of 1 because there were certain things I wanted to get done on each jump. And so the helmet ended up weighing as much as my rig, and that's not an exaggeration. My helmet would weigh as much as 22 to 24 pounds.
That's crazy.
Yeah, back when the canopies opened hard, you knew every jump that you had an opening shock for sure.
As long as I've known you, you've been into physical fitness. And were there, back then, did you get into it because of the physical demands that placed on you, your neck, for example, or were you always into physical fitness?
I was always into physical fitness. I was amazed at how my body would respond to certain things like working out and diet and things like that. And like I said, I came from a mixed background as far as family, and my parents, both of them, were overweight, and I knew that I didn't want to be overweight, and it was a way to control my weight and my physical fitness. I mean, Matt, you work out. It feels good to be in control of your own body.
For sure, yeah. Do you think that's played a role in your longevity in the sport?
Absolutely. Absolutely. It saved my life when I went in.
So since we're talking about that now, it's kind of jumping ahead a little bit, but would you mind telling us about that incident?
Sure. I was at Cross Keys, New Jersey, and I was filming a tandem, and they opened a little high. So, and of course, we do open high, too, in case the spot's long. And I threw out my pilot chute, and it just sit there and towed, and then it towed, and then it towed, and I hit with my elbow the side of the container trying to undo it, and it still towed, so I cut away and I dumped my reserve. Well, when I cut away, of course, the three rings let go, and when I opened my reserve, it made the backpack looser, and it allowed the main to open. So the main and the reserve were coming out at the same time, except the main wasn't attached to me. What it did was the left main riser attached to my slider on my reserve, pulled it back up to the stops, and then spun it around. So I had maybe 2 cells showing. And I knew I was going to die. There was no question about that. The only thing I was really wondering was if it was going to hurt, And I looked down, and I was over a bunch of trees. And I thought, now, not only am I going to go in, they're not even going to be able to find my body when I go in. Well, as it turns out, the trees saved my life because the garbage I had over my head caught the trees long enough to save my life. And then the branches broke, and I fell and hit real hard anyhow. But if it wasn't for the trees, I'd have never made it. I'd have gone in for sure.
That's incredible. I remember going out to Cross Keys. I think we were doing an America's Cup or something out there years ago. Maybe when did that happen? Was it 98 or was it?
No, 99 or 2000.
99. Okay, yeah. So it must have been around that time. And I remember you showing us that video. Man, that's my nightmare, and it's incredible that you lived through it and are able to sit here and tell us about it now. Is there anything that you would have done differently in that situation? I know it's something that's kind of contested in our sport as to you hear different opinions about how to handle that malfunction, whether you should cut away first for a total or go straight to your reserve. Is there anything that you would have done different in hindsight in that situation?
I thought about it long and hard. Of course, I didn't want to admit that I made a mistake, but I look back and I think I did. I made a mistake by cutting away. I've gone through all the scenarios that are possible, from cutting away and dumping your reserve and not cutting away and dumping your reserve. And I like the chances of not cutting away and dumping my reserve. I've had 2 parachutes out before. And I know that's very landable and it's not very safe, but it's very doable, And what I had wasn't doable. If it wasn't for the grace of God, I wouldn't be here for putting me over those trees, And I don't like really relying on that. I'd like rather rely on my own judgment.
Absolutely, but when you're in the heat of the moment, it's definitely hard to pass any kind of judgment, because when you're in the heat of the moment, it's you're going to go off of reflexes, right? I would imagine, like anytime I've been in a malfunction, I go straight to what I've trained. There's not a whole lot of time to think, right, when you're in that moment. Exactly.
People say time stands still, and I don't believe that's true. I think things are going fast on you, and you've got to act, If there's ever a really reason for a good majority of our fatalities, I think it's because people don't act. And that's what's killing them. People who act, even when they do the wrong thing, have a chance of survival. It's when you do nothing that you have no chance for survival. That's changed some now in lieu of the AED, but still, who wants to put their life on an AED?
For sure, yeah, and that goes back to it's a favorite quote of mine, and it goes something like this. I might be botching it up a little bit, but we don't rise to the level of our expectations, but we fall to the level of our training. And I know that's intended for performance related, but in that case, it is a performance related thing. Dan BC just wrote a great article for Skydive Mag on the amount of times that you should train your malfunction procedures, your emergency procedures, and it makes a lot of sense to me. We do a lot of visualization for the skydives that we do, for the formations, for the competitions, whatever we're about to do. But I know that personally, over my past, maybe once or twice before the jump, I'll rehearse my EPs in my mind and go through it with my hands and arms. But I definitely don't do it as much as I should, I don't think. But luckily, over the years, I've trained enough to where when I have had a malfunction, it's pretty automatic.
Well, even what you're doing, even though you don't think it's enough, it's more than most people do. Being a photographer, especially a documentary photographer, you learn to watch and observe everything. And one of the things I've observed on the way to altitude is nobody's doing gear checks. Nobody is doing handle checks. They're joking, they're laughing, or they're sleeping, or maybe they're dirt diving or skydive. But I don't see people doing their handles checks like they should. And so when it comes time, like you said, you rise to your training. And if your training isn't to go for those handles, you're going to miss them maybe.
Right, absolutely. I want to go back a little bit and go back to the time when, if I remember correctly from doing some research about you, it was at Zephyr Hills, and you were a pioneer in competition videography for formation skydiving. I think this is timely since the World Cup of formation skydiving is getting ready to go on, and it's so awesome to be sitting here with you talking about this. But if you could describe to us how that went down and what your involvement in that was.
It's funny you would ask that. It was really a huge time in my life, and as it turns out, a huge time for competition and in the sport. Originally, judging was done by ground to air with telemeters. And we were at Zephyr Hills, and we were having a huge, huge meet. It was either the turkey meet or the Easter boogie. I forget which. But they had a large competition, bird, all the people were there. And they had to stop jumping because of clouds. And it was Florida, and that happened all too often. And the owner of the drop zone, he was really upset because his airplanes weren't flying. I mean, it was conceivably jumpable, but it wasn't judgeable. And Sandy Williams was the chief judge, and we were sitting in the judging room, and Sandy, his name's eluding me now. But anyhow, the owner of the drop zone was there, and he was upset, and Sandy says, well, why don't you send Mike up to video a team? At least I can judge off what I see there, so we at least get them off. So they sent me up to film a team. And it was a normal slot for me, flying above it, steep, and so I could get the picture I wanted, usually with the drop zone underneath. And we got down. Sandy looked at the video, judged the dive, and George Cabela, that was the guy's name. I was glad it came to me. He says, let's run the meet like that. Well, there wasn't that many videographers back then, so we only had a couple people that could do it. And we ran the meet that way. And we got a lot of protests from a lot of the teams because they had learned how to cheat the telemeters. And they were unhappy because they didn't know how to cheat the air-to-air video.
I was going to ask you about that. I think I heard somewhere that Jerry Bird wasn't too happy, about that because of something that they had worked out to kind of, work around the telemeters.
Yeah, he was very unhappy about it. And even Mike Truffer, who had Skydiving Magazine, wasn't happy about it. Mike even wrote an article after the meet and complaining about the air-to-air video. And then I went into Mike's office and told him that I thought, I was kind of offended by that. And I don't even know if offended is the right word, but I was taken back by that. And we talked it over, and after a little conversation with Mike, he agreed that was the way of the future. And he just didn't like it because he didn't know how to deal with it.
That's it's an incredible story, and there's always, any time there's change like that, you're going to be met with some kind of resistance, right? But it's such a cool thing to look back and then think about that period of time where it was a revolution for our sport, as to what we know it today with the videographers for every teams, and it's standardized and there's rules for it, and it's just kind of grown beyond there. So, just that you've had this tremendous effect on the sport is really cool.
Oh, thank you. Yeah. There was people that helped, too, people like Tommy Pyrus and stuff like that, who saw the value in air-to-air video. As a matter of fact, he soon put us to work filming the four-ways training so he could use it for evaluation and better his ability to turn four-way. And I'd say Tommy Pyrus was probably one of the fathers of air-to-air training video.
That's awesome. That's incredible. What other things did it lead you to do? Like, was that a launching platform to go to other things as far as gear R&D and things like that for you to get into?
Well, I went to work for George Galloway at Precision Aerodynamics. He made the precision canopies, and I did a lot of R&D for him and used video for that. And then when I moved to Florida for good, Bill Booth put me to work because I was starving, and he saw that. And Bill Booth, by the way, is one of my heroes. He's helped a lot of us. And he put me to work shooting stuff, just so I'd have work. And then it turned out that he saw the value in it, and it helped him develop different pilot chutes, different cutaway systems, and things like that. And so I did a lot of R&D for Bill Booth and work like that.
How long did you do that for him?
I'd say at least several years.
And what were some of the more memorable R&Ds that come to mind?
Oh, boy, there's one that really comes to mind. Bill wanted to see how this pilot chute the reserve pilot chute came off a guy's back on a cutaway. And the only way to get that film was for me and the person who was going to cut away to dock under canopy. And then I would slide down the lines to the risers and put my feet in the V's. And I would give a guy named Bob Nixon, the okay. He would cut away and I'd start firing, looking down.
Wow.
Well, what would happen was when he let go of the toggles and went for his handles, the canopy started flying, which made it go below me, and I came out of the V in the risers, and when he cut away, the whole canopy just tangled up all around me.
Oh, jeez.
And it was just a matter of snarly grabbing hands and pulling the nylon away from my face, and again, good fortune was with me. I got out of it and was okay. So after we did that, and I wouldn't slide down the lines anymore, I would just stay up there with my feet by the connection points, so when the canopy did flap away, it was underneath me.
Okay, so did you hang on to the canopy after it was cut away with your feet, or did you kind of let yourself free from it and let it go?
I let that sucker go. I didn't want it near me after that first experience.
I totally understand that. I'd have been surprised otherwise. How many times do you think it took you to get that shot when you were engulfed in the canopy? Was that the first time you tried it, or did that happen later?
Yeah,
oh,
first
wow.
time. We were learning all this as we went along. You know, our canopy relative work was new at the time. You know, not everybody had done canopy relative work. So that was new. And it took us probably, I would say, 30 jumps to get the picture we wanted. Remember, I was only getting 2 frames a second with my camera. So when they would cut away and I would put the button down, the pilot chute would either be out of frame or it wouldn't have launched at that particular time when I was firing my camera. So it took about 30 jumps of going up and docking and then him cutting away.
Wow. Did you have video camera on as well for that, or were you just shooting still?
Oh, I shot video too.
Okay. And what did that lead to as far as improvements in the gear, if any?
Well, one, it showed Bill that what his pilot chute would do, how it reacted to the air once it burst from the container, which is an important thing. And we did one of the things he found out was it wasn't so much the pilot chute launch that dictated the time of from cutaway, from reserve pull to open. It was canopy fill time, and nobody had even thought of that. It never even dawned on anybody that was the important part. There was this big race between the SST racer because their pilot chute was outside the container, and they were saying that their reserve opening was so much faster because the pilot chute had a better launch. And after all that jumping we did and all the video we studied and stuff like that, we realized that the name of the game is canopy fill time. It's not necessarily the pilot chute launch.
That's incredible. Were you around for any of the 3-ring progression there?
No, that was out when I started filming.
Okay.
The 3 rings were already out.
Okay, gotcha. And how many jumps did you have when you started filming?
1,000 jumps when I first started doing with the camera on my helmet.
Okay.
I'd done filming with a handheld when I had 200-300 jumps.
What advice would you have for young videographers looking to get into it, or young skydivers, experience-wise, looking to get into air-to-air videography and photography?
What an open question. One is slow down. You know, don't be so in such a hurry to get that camera on your helmet. You know, people are putting cameras on their helmet right away, and then they're not being a photographer at all. There's a huge difference between a photographer and a camera pointer. And right now we have a large number of camera pointers out there who are being mistaken as photographers. And so I would say if you want to be a photographer, take your time, learn about photography, understand the pyramid of light exposure and stuff like that. And think about as much about your photography as you think about your skydiving. And you can't do that, Matt, until you've got 600, 700, 800 jumps. Because I don't care with wind tunnel and all that, you don't have the comfort in free fall that you need to do that. So you can be thinking about framing and lighting and composition instead of having to think about flying because you're doing that naturally. And that was really, if I enjoyed any success, and I feel like I did, it was because for whatever reason I waited till I had 1,000 jumps before I started doing photography. And everybody says I just came by it natural, and I guess maybe I did because I had that flying ability when I started doing photography.
Oh, that makes a lot of sense, and I would totally agree with that. Not being a anywhere near accomplished videographer myself, I do remember when I first started with the Golden Knights 8-way team. I was the videographer alternate, and I remember coming out here and doing a couple training camps out at Skydive Arizona, getting ready for the 1996 World Championships, or I'm sorry, the 1996 U.S. Nationals, and then the 97 World Championships. But I remember coming out here, and one of my first experiences with you, I was super nervous because you were coming along to shoot primary video and photos for the 8-way team. And we were launching out of the tailgate. I think we were jumping a Skyvan at the time. So I think you talked to me about riding the bull out, holding on to the leg straps going from inside the aircraft. And I think you were on the ramp, with your back facing the tail of the aircraft. And as we went out, I just held on a little too long. And I just remember, I'm like, man, I'm on the plane with Mike Mcgowan here. And I'd watched all your videos when I was a young skydiver, and I was pretty starstruck, so I wanted to impress you. And as soon as that thing came out, I ended up right smack dab in the middle on top of the formation, with my belly on the pack trays, the guys underneath me, and I was just like a fish stuck in a net. And I just remember being mortified. And we get down on the ground, and you're like, hey, buddy, those who have and those who will.
Yeah, that's right, too. We've all made those mistakes, and the important thing is, and obviously you have, is every little mistake you might have made, you've learned from. Otherwise, you wouldn't be at the level you're at now. And that's another important thing is everybody thinks if they admit they made a mistake, they're belittling themselves. And I'll be darned, anybody who's ever come up to me and says, man, I was wrong, I have felt admiration for them because I knew that, one, they were done with that mistake. They will never make it again, And it takes some cojones to admit that you're wrong. But once you do, it feels good.
It does, yeah, for sure. Since we're talking about the Golden Knights, do you know if you had any kind of visible effect from your perspective when you pioneered doing video for competition, whether that had an effect on the Golden Knights, and did they kind of take that and run with it a little bit, or if you can tell us anything about that?
Do you remember Andy Gerber?
Sure do.
Yeah, well, he was running the 8-way team at Z Hills, and I don't remember the year. And it was the year that their photographer went in. Maybe you'll remember that. He had a line caught on his ring sight, and he went in fighting it, And the Knights had to still jump. They had to continue on after the next day. They did what they had to do that day, and then the next day, but they were without a video guy. And Andy come up and asked me if I'd work with him until I could find somebody to shoot some video. And I said, sure. And like I said, I was used to flying steep. That was, if I didn't have my hands in the verbal, I didn't feel like I was playing very well with others, And so I went up and I filmed them through that whole training camp. And Andy, he gave me a huge compliment. He says, man, I've never had such judgeable video before,
Wow.
And coming from Andy Gerber, who was one of my heroes, and you talk about having being nervous and stuff like that, I was nervous filming the nights because, you know, the nights they're the nights.
Yeah. You've gone on to have a wonderful career with many accolades and accomplishments. Do you have any that stand out that are the most memorable to you?
Well, I think when I received the USPA gold medal for accomplishment, USPA award there, that was probably the golden hour of my life when I went up to the stage. It was the four-way event at Paris Valley during the Nationals, and it was packed with people. And they brought me up on stage to present it to me, and they gave me a standing ovation. And I was totally taken back. I've never had a moment like that in my life, and I don't know if I'll ever have a moment like that again, because I felt for the first time that I was accepted. People really liked me, you know. And that's, as a photographer, that's about as good a compliment as you can get.
Well, yeah, we do. I know I can speak for many of us that we do like you. We love you, and you've been a permanent fixture in our sport, and you're always so friendly, and you're a good person, you know, more than anything. I think even that, you know, goes far beyond your accomplishments as a videographer and photographer. And yeah, so, you know, I can just thank you for your inspiration as far as that goes, and thank you for being so awesome to me, you know, since the first time you met me up until present.
Wow, what a nice thing to say. Thank you.
Yeah. You've been involved in multiple world records, right? Shooting for those.
Oh, yeah.
What were some of the challenges and some of the highlights on those?
Well, the challenges are, again, I'll try to explain a little photography only so you'll understand. Our camera back in the old days fired about 2 to 3 frames a second. That meant you pushed a button down when it was on auto wind, and it would take 2 or 3 pictures per second, you know. And so that wasn't much when you were trying to film a world record, because sometimes it would only last a second or two. Although originally world records had to be held for 5 seconds. Which is the way I think it still should be, you know, because you establish that you've got that record and you feel like you're there on purpose, you know. But I usually had to do the getting everybody together for that, and then getting the right photographers to do that, and then learning where you had to be during opening. Because those are all things that we'd never done before. To have 2 or 3 camera people in the air at the same time had not been done. And they were breaking away at $5,000 and on 100 ways and bigger, which is pretty low by today's standards, but seemed to be high enough back then. So we had to get everybody opened, you know, and safe. And you had to be there in a position, so when they did get that record, you'd be in big trouble if you didn't have your video going and your camera taking pictures. And that said, one of the big problems we had in the beginning was our video players didn't work. They were made to film little Johnny growing up, and you know, and taking his first steps and things like that. And here we were bolting them to our helmets, and then we had to take the recorders and strap them to our chest because they weren't inside the camera back then. And they didn't want to work all the time, you know. And I remember one time when I was filming a women's world record in Montgomery, New York, I had a camera that worked on the battery, and I had a chest recorder that worked on huge batteries. And we're going to altitude. We were flying in real slow climbing planes. I can't think of the name of them right now. But they were ultra slow, but they were tailgates. And I noticed that the battery on my helmet camera was low. So I took the extra wires I had off my momentary release for my still camera, and I cut them, and I took and put wires on the positive and negative of my big battery in my chest recorder that had all kinds of voltage in it, and hooked it to the little battery on my still camera in for my helmet, and I charged my battery on the way to altitude. And then I put the batteries in, and I had just enough battery on my camera to film the jump. which, by the way, they got the record on.
Wow.
So it was, talk about a nervous Mike Mcgowan.
Yeah, I'll bet. But what a great creative solution you made it happen. That's awesome. Do you remember what the size of the record was at that time?
He was probably a 90-way or a 100-way. No, it would have been a 90-way or something like that, because a 100-way had just been built in '86, I think. And that was the first 100-way. We got that at Muskogee, Oklahoma.
Nice. For the was it during the World Freefall Convention?
No, the 100-way was done at the U.S. Nationals in Muskogee.
Oh, wow.
They used to have a boogie during the Nationals, too. And when they did it at Muskogee, it was really, I wish they still did it, because it was an excuse for everybody to get together and have fun, you know.
Yeah. Yeah, I've never been to one of those. I wish I, would have made it, but I think they stopped shortly after I was on the Golden Knights. We were always training during that time, getting ready for competition. What was the biggest record, world record that you were on?
300-way.
The 300-way.
We did here, yeah.
Nice. And when was that one done?
Oh, why are you asking me
Oh,
that? I'm terrible on dates. I just remember that it was further away than yesterday.
Yeah, gotcha.
You know.
Yeah, no
But
worries.
I organized the photography on that too. That used to be one of the jobs that I got set up with all the time, was organizing the photography. You know, which is not always an easy job, because sometimes you get people with egos, that don't want to follow directions. But for a world record, you've got a job to do, not an art to express, but a job to do. And then, so I would get caught doing that sometimes.
Well, there's not a big margin of error for everyone involved in those record attempts, right? I mean, it's got to be super organized to ensure success and ensure the safety of all involved, right?
You're absolutely right.
And if you don't mind me asking, how would you go about selecting the other videographers?
Well, one is their ability and past experience to film world records and stuff like that, and ability to work with that kind of person and stuff like that. And if you wanted to work with that guy, I mean, by the time we got doing world records and stuff like that, there was enough videographers out there and photographers that could do the job. So why not pick the kind of people that are easy to work with, the Willie Boykins and the Bruno Boykin and the Craig O'Briens and people like that?
Absolutely. Since you're talking about Craig O'Brien, I know he's done a bunch of stunt work for well-known movies. Mission Impossible is one of them. What were some stunts that you were involved with? And can you tell us some about those?
Well, I didn't do many, and I'll tell you why. There's a reason. I had a chance to go to Hollywood and make the big money. It was there for me if I wanted it, because I had the experience level and I had the people out there knew my name, But I chose to stay away from that because things like AFF and Tandem were just becoming. They hadn't been there yet. They were just becoming, and they needed video and photography support. And it was part of the sport that I wanted to really be a part of and help grow, because I don't know if I said to myself, this is going to be an important part of the sport and I want to be a part of it. I don't know if I had that kind of foresight, but I had some kind of an instinct that it was important. And it was about the sport, not about the glory. And I'll be honest with you, you can't be in the public's eye without having a deal with some what they call glory and stuff like that, but that's never been a big thing to me. The big thing is I just like to skydive with my friends and get a good picture.
That's awesome. I love that. I love your passion about the sport. It's contagious, and it's evident just in the amount of time that you've been with the sport. I mean, continuously since 1964. That's an incredible achievement. I'd like to talk about the gold medal that you got with a legendary sky surfer by the name of Patrick de Gaillardon. Can you tell us about that?
Oh, sure. That's a fun memory. I won't goof up his accent and try to imitate his accent, but him and I were good friends all along, from Florida days when he used to be an 8-way champion on the French 8-way team. And I've known him for years and years and years. And so he was here during getting ready for the World Championships of the sky surfing. And it wasn't the official world record. It was just the first World Championships we had, where we had international representation,
Okay.
And he came up to me and he says, Mike, he says, would you video me for the championships? And I says, well, sure, I'd love to. And I'd never videoed him before sky surfing as long as I'd known him. And the first jump we went up and performed was once I exited, and I have a sharp eye. I don't get easily distracted. When I'm going after a shot, nothing else is important to me in my life but getting that shot, And when Patrick came out and started doing the aerobatics he did with that board, for a second or two, I lost the thought about framing and whether I should be filming. I was so amazed at watching that gentleman perform. I did keep it in frame just out of muscle memory, but it really, when I got on the ground, I said, wow, for a second there, I wasn't even thinking about videoing him.
Wow, that's incredible.
Yeah.
And if you can tell us a little more about that experience for a competition and leading up to that medal.
Well, the competition was intense. There was a lot of good sky surfers back then, and I can't remember their names. I really feel bad. There's 2 French guys that were phenomenal, and there was a guy named Russell, somebody or other. But it was an intense competition. It wasn't a walk away for Patrick. It wasn't at all, And I remember, because I'm an artist, I'm not a competitor. So I remember going in the airplane on the way to altitude for the first jump, and I was paralyzed. And I wouldn't call it fear, but it could have been, But I found myself paralyzed, and I says, oh, my gosh, what am I going to do? I'm not going to be able to do this. I can't function here. And then it dawned on me, because I believe in energy, and I believe in the energy you can receive from other people. And there's an incredible camaraderie between competitors. You know that better than me. And I looked around, and everybody was a friendly face. And everybody was, it's one of those things that they all want you to succeed, but they want to succeed just a little better, So everybody on that airplane wanted us to succeed. And I drew from that energy, And the next thing you know, I was breathing back again, and things were right, and we went up and we killed it.
That's a great perspective. I still get that exit anxiety, especially during competition when you're with your teammates. You're involved in any kind of team sport, which you were with Patrick. You don't want to let your teammates down,
Exactly.
So you want to perform to that level, and it's obviously in competition there's going to be winners and there's going to be losers, and we all try to do our best. But it's it's just something that you have to deal with, and something that's part of the sport. But I love your perspective on it. That's great. Obviously, Patrick was a pioneer within the sport of sky surfing and with wingsuiting. So I want to go back a little bit and talk to you about how the camera suits evolved. What was your first camera suit, and then how did the wings evolve from there? Did you have wings for your first suit, or was it just a baggier suit?
Just a baggy suit. I'm a parachute rigger. Actually, I'm a master parachute rigger. And so I do a lot of sewing and things like that. And I'd seen a couple people with wings. I think M. Anderson Jenkins was one of the first guys I can recollect that had wings on his jumpsuit. And it made sense to me, and it seemed really intriguing to have wings on my suit. So I built me a wingsuit and started jumping with that. And you learn to fly those wings. And once you learn to fly those wings, you can do things with them that you can't do without them, especially when you got to be in all kinds of cockeyed positions to film and in all kinds of different places on that formation, whether you want to be below it, above it, beside it, and change immediately from being level with it to being above it. Those things you can do with wings that you can't do without them. But it's an art. It's a real art learning how to fly those wings.
What was your progression like with that art? I know, I assume that you started out on your belly, and at what point did you learn to fly on your back with the wings inflated whenever you want to get an underneath shot of a formation?
Roger Nelson helped me a lot with that. He's another pioneer in the sport that I have an extremely high regard for, but he flew and did things like that before anybody else did. And I knew that if I wanted to get people's faces, I was going to have to film from underneath, because eventually you get tired of filming backpacks and helmets, And I've evolved to where all I wanted to do was film people and their faces and their expressions and things like that. So I knew I had to be able to do that. And at first I taught myself to ride on the wings and then bend my knees quite a bit, so I would be flying almost in a stand-up position, but I'd be holding on my altitude with my wings. And that worked, but it was only for a temporary time. You could hold that position and stuff like that. So then it made sense that you'd want to have to sit fly. And I kind of developed, and people don't use it today, but if I was back to doing it again, I would use that position again where I was half back flying and half sit flying. And what I used to love to do for boogie videos was go over the top of a formation, circle underneath it, and then come back on top. It made just an awesome video,
So you would have to do different transitions within that big rotation in order to keep the formation and frame.
Absolutely,
as you're doing
absolutely.
That. Wow, that's awesome. Were there any developments or any part of the evolution in skydiving in general, or as it pertains to videography and photography, that caught you by surprise over the year?
No, not really. I pretty much wanted to be, always found myself at the head of the game, whether it become equipment. I was one of the first persons to ever film digital, and things like that. No, I don't think I ever have been surprised about the evolution of it, because like I had said way earlier, there was nobody in front of us to teach us how to do it, really. So we were making it up as we went along, and I was always right there up at the head of the line, making it up as I went along so I could get that shot. You get to a phase in your life, you want one thing, and you want one thing really bad. You become so, some people call it passionate, but I think it got to the point of obsession for me, that I wanted that shot. I wanted to catch those people, because I don't know if you realize it, and I don't know if the people I film realize it, but they're my heroes. And they're the people I want to make look good. And you don't have to be a world champion to look good. All you have to do is jump out of an airplane and you're my hero. I mean, after all, you've made a sport out of an emergency procedure. How cool can you be?
Yeah, I guess that's true. I love your perspective on it. And it's a testament to your longevity in the sport that, you've made habit of that, made a positive habit of staying ahead of the curve. And, that's just, I think that's one of the reasons I would imagine that that you can that you've had such longevity in the sport.
Thank you.
Yeah. Who are some of your mentors in the sport?
My mentors, Mike Sizemore was one of them. Probably nobody's ever heard of him, but he really helped me. He taught me about S-stops and shutter speeds. Russell Webb, Carl Banish, without question, was my hero, just my hero. And Norm Kemp was one of my people that I love working with and learned a lot from. And I think it's fair to say that we learned from each other. We were coming up at the same time. A lot of people think that, oh my gosh, we had to be enemies, because each one of us was trying so hard to do good, But I never once, and I think this goes the same for Norm, never once did I go up and say, I got to do better than Norm. And I don't think Norm ever went up and said he's got to do better than me. We just wanted to get that image. We had that obsession, and we just didn't think about other people like that. But Norm was an icon of mine too.
Yeah, for sure. He's incredible. What I've noticed from an outside perspective is that you've got different perspectives on it. Like, your takes on it are completely different. They're equally beautiful and phenomenal and capture your attention, but they are a little bit different. And I think that's what makes it so great, and maybe why you wouldn't have to worry about competing with anyone, because each person brings their unique perspective to it. Absolutely.
Norm has his own way of getting pictures, and he likes the far off shot, I noticed, with all the landscape and everything in. And you're right, it looks beautiful. But to me, I keep thinking he shouldn't be taking pictures yet. He's got to get closer, because I want to get in there where I get people's expressions. It's one of the reasons I love four-way. I love to film four-way because, oh my gosh, you talk about action. That's where the action is. Eight-way now is gotten fast too. But for the longest time, four-way was where you got people who were really moving it and really hitting all kinds of body positions and things like that.
Yeah, my teammate on Airspeed, Mcgowan, Markine, was talking about my expressions in free fall yesterday. Apparently, I had some try-hard expressions on my face. It's you're absolutely right. I think four-way for me, it's out of my comfort zone right now. Eight-way I feel totally comfortable with and been doing it for so many years. But the four-way, it's super intense and it's dynamic and constant movement, and it's a big challenge. So yeah, I'm sure. I'm sure I've got some pretty silly expressions on my face there.
Not silly at all. That's called you're intense.
No. I appreciate that. You released a book not too long ago titled Selections, correct?
God bless you for bringing that up. Yes, I did. After I retired from skydiving because of health issues, I had the time to finally get in and get all my pictures out and put a book together. And I took all the pictures that I have available to me. Some of them have been lost over the years, so I wasn't able to put them in there. But I took all the best pictures I had available to me and made a book. And I'm very proud of it. It's my legacy for my children, and they're very proud of it too. It's sold well, but even if it hadn't sold well, I'd be happy because my kids got such a big kick. Their dad put a book out,
Yeah, it's phenomenal, and I suggest anyone who hasn't seen it to pick up a copy. Can you tell us where people can find that online?
Yeah, at Selections. I'll spell it for you even if you want me to.
Sure.
Only kidding. Selectionsthebook.com is the website where you can pick it up, or at any of the gear stores. Almost all of the major gear stores carry it, and I'll be doing a book signing at the Hall of Fame this October 17th to the 20th, and there'll be plenty of them for sale there too.
Oh, awesome. Cool. Yeah, I definitely suggest that people pick up a copy there. And before I ask the final question, where else can people find you online?
Well, I hang out at Facebook a lot, and that's about the only place you can find me online anymore. I've kind of closed up my website because I just haven't been adding new pictures to it and so it got kind of stale to me. So about the only place you can get me is on Facebook, but I'm readily available there.
Awesome. Yeah, I'll put those in the show notes on the website. And for the final question, what advice would you have to offer to people that are wanting to embark on a champion's journey of their own, or what advice would you offer over what you've already offered for aspiring videographers and photographers for freefall?
Boy, that's an entailed question, yeah. One thing that you're going to have the certain ingredients, because without them, no effort is going to do any good. And you have to have a passion for what you want to do, And if you have that passion, and it happens to be that you want to get that shot, you want to take a picture that nobody else has taken before, you want something that makes people look again at it while they're looking at it, or go, oh, wow, or something like that. Without that passion, nothing I can tell you will turn you into that kind of photographer. But if you have that passion, there's nothing I need to tell you. You've got it.
Awesome advice, Mike. Thank you so much for coming on the podcast. I really appreciate it, brother.
Thank you for having me.
Don't forget to visit our website at www.achampionsjourney.com and give us a follow on our Facebook and Instagram pages.